We're not positive because life is easy. We're positive because life can be hard. Organizations and teams that are positive stand out financially and from a performance perspective versus their competition.
You can drop assumptions, ask curious questions, listen fully. You'll become more empathetic.
Oh, my word. I love every bit of that. I love every bit of that. I agree with every bit of it. I want your listeners to hear that sometimes not everybody's going to think it's cool that you're super positive. I was at Hershey and I was criticized for my overly positive attitude.
The way you communicate value and dignity to somebody else is that undivided attention.
How many people I've heard from that no one has ever said the words, I believe.
Welcome to P Cubed. Today I'm thrilled to have Julie Nee, a seasoned leader, motivational speaker, and breast cancer survivor join us. Julie's journey from her impactful career at the Hershey Company to her inspiring work at the John Gordon Companies has shaped her passion for fostering positivity and resilience in leadership. This episode will explore how we can lead with optimism, overcoming challenges, and building meaningful connections in both life and work. Julie, it's an honor to have you with us. Hey, Julie, let's just jump right into the conversation today. I want to ask you a little bit about this positivity and the leadership piece that you're focused on right now. How has fostering positivity shaped your leadership philosophy and helped you inspire meaningful change within teams and organizations?
In my work with John Gordon, I have seen positivity make an impact on individuals, on teams, on organizations, on cultures. And the truth is, we're not positive because life is easy. We're positive because life can be hard. And you might have heard John Gordon say that at some point, but that's really the core of what it is. There are hard things happening in life, in business, in our families, all around us. But positivity is what can help us get through them. And I think people sometimes lose sight of that, and they think that it's all just la-di-da and we're just being fluffy positive. But the truth is, it's real. Being positive is real, and it helps us overcome the big challenges in our lives and in our businesses. And we can talk about Hershey stuff, but organizations and teams that are positive stand out financially and from a performance perspective versus their competition. So it's just, I just want you to hear that it's real. It's not fluffy stuff.
Oh, sure. So, but it's not the power of just positive thinking, is it?
No, it's positive thinking and positive actions, really. I mean, let's be honest, a positive action could just be me saying, oh my gosh, Preston, it's so good to see you. Good morning. Sure. Versus like, okay, hey, what do we got here? Let's go. Let's start the questions, right?
Yeah,
right. It's connection, and it's building bridges and building relationships, and it's smiling at people, and it's giving positive greetings. It's so much more than just a buzzword.
Certainly. Do you have a story, Julie, that might help us understand somebody that you've worked with that was not maybe didn't express the positivity or wasn't like that at first, and then they had some type of transformation the way they approached people or their teams, and what happened?
Oh, yes, of course. There's one example that comes to mind with a guy on one of my teams at Hershey, and it was interesting because he didn't know that he was being perceived in a negative way. And what happened was I was leading a big sales team, and one of the customers that could really move the needle from a business perspective, this guy led that team. And every time someone came to him from sales planning or marketing or finance or whatever, hey, what if we try this with this customer? What if we try that? What if we try this? What if we try that? He would just say, nope, it's against their policy. Nope, they can't do that. Nope, we can't do this. And people, his business partners in the organization really were just put off by him and the no's and the pushing back. And when we were in performance review time at the end of the year, actually one year, we were talking about him, and we were doing this thing that we called calibration. You may or may not remember that. And
yeah, sure.
All of the business partners were saying to me as his boss, yeah, that guy, I hate working with him. He's terrible. He says no all the time. He's so negative about what's possible, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So we did our thing. And then I went back and had a conversation with him. And by the way, he had been with the organization for a number of years, and no one had ever had this conversation with him before. And I think that's just one of the biggest pieces is we have to be willing to have the conversations with people. Because when I told him, he was like, what? Yeah. I had no idea. I was just trying to do the best in representing my customer to the company. But the perception was, who's paying your paycheck, right? Who are you fighting for, right? And he had a decision to make in that moment. He could be like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm just representing the customer. Or he could be like, you know what? I want to be a better business partner, and I'm going to make a decision to change. And he did. And so we aligned, and that by the end of that conversation, we aligned that for the next year, he's just going to come at it with a mindset of what if, or how might we, right? Just what's possible versus what's impossible. And so every time a business partner came to him that year and they said, what if we try this? He would say, that's not necessarily their policy. Why don't I ask? Or what if we try this? Well, it might not work in that size, but what if we tried this size? Or, whatever it was just having conversations about possibility and change. And literally that same calibration session a year later, his business partners were like, this guy is my favorite business partner to work with. I love that guy. It's so amazing. He was so much more collaborative this year. He was positive. He talked about what was possible. And you think about what happened for him from a performance rating standpoint and from a bonus and from a raise perspective after making that decision to transform and really just make a decision about being positive and about talking about what's possible versus what's not possible. Huge change.
Yeah, that's self-awareness. I think once somebody brings that to light and then they start to think, okay, maybe the problem might be me, and how do I shift and change? It makes a big difference, and they can make that adjustment. It's funny, at the Coca-Cola company, we had calibration sessions too. And the listeners might have heard me share this, but I want to just relate this back to you for the conversation. So calibration, but it was done in the context of 11 reorgs that I was part of. So think about that. In the corporate world, every couple of years we had a reorg, and I tell people all the time that working at the Coca-Cola company was like being a member of Congress. Every 2 years you're up for re-election, right?
Oh,
and you began campaigning again to make sure you had the capital to stay. But that's, Julie, where I learned this idea, and my leadership philosophy is how is greater than what. And how you do something is greater than what you do. And I tell people all the time, results are table stakes. You got to deliver results. It's how you do those. And so I learned that around the table, because what happened is people in those conversations, you go through calibration, they may have delivered the results, but if they were a jerk or they weren't collaborating with people, not cooperative, or their focuses were wrong, or the way they did things, if that was off, even though they might have had some good results, they figured out a way to move them on. And so that's what I wholeheartedly agree and appreciate that story, because if you are self-aware of what you do, it makes a big difference. Tell me about attitude in the midst of this positivity piece. How does that play a role? Is that the same thing to you a little bit, or how does that work in?
I think as it relates to the story that I just shared, they're very well connected, because it's that believing about what's possible, right? And especially when you think about teams and organizations trying to attack a business plan or a problem or an opportunity. And if you're sitting in a room with people who have a positive attitude about it and are like, okay, I think we can do that. Is it going to be hard? Yep. Can we do it? Yes, we sure can. And just having that mindset of believing in what's possible. So yes, I think attitude is everything. I mean, think about our body language. Think about everything that we bring. People are receiving that energy from us. And even virtually, even you and I are exchanging energy right here on this podcast. So we are. That's the truth. Yep. And I mean, think about the attitude at your family dinner table. Think about what you're bringing to your kids, what you're bringing to your wife. All those things, our attitudes matter so much in every way that we engage with the grocery store person when we're checking out, right? We can make an impact on someone just with that attitude and that smile. And you know what? Did you find everything you needed today? You know what? I actually didn't, but it's cool. I'll get it next time, or I'll maybe you can help me find it next time, or whatever it is. But yes, I think attitude is so important. And also, Preston, I want to come back to what you said about self-awareness.
Sure.
Because when I was doing research for my book, Mirror, Mirror, I just found so many studies, and there's a study about self-awareness, and it says that 95% of us think that we're self-aware.
Oh, yeah.
10 to 15% actually are. So think about that gap. we think
Huge.
that we're bringing a positive attitude. We think that we're maybe smiling at people or whatever we are, but we're actually, there's a giant gap between what we think we're doing and what we're actually doing. So we have to look ourselves in the mirror a little bit more and really understand what we're bringing to the people around us.
Oh, yeah. There was an earth-shaking event in my career that happened. I went through a 360 evaluation with about 20 people on my team and that I was leading at the time. And to walk away and hear the challenges that they brought to me, that it put in me, Julie, the fact that I needed to change. If I didn't change, I would be changed, right? Changed out of the job. And so, but the fun part is I made those changes over a year. We had a second 360, like your individual you just mentioned about that recalibration or the calibration session. And it came back positive. So it's good that people can make that shift. I do want to mention, just to the listeners real quick, I think this idea of attitude is so important. And I would encourage them to think about someone that they truly admire. Because it could be a mentor, a colleague, a friend, maybe a family member. And then think about what it was that stands out to you about them. And then I want you to think about 5 qualities about that individual. What do you admire in them? And as I take people through that exercise, often, Julie, you typically net out on things like you just mentioned. It's typically their positivity, their determination, sense of hope, ability to inspire, or maybe the way that they encourage others. It's that interaction. It's the how they treat people. And I would just say to the listeners today, our millennial audience, that a positive attitude and this positivity is more than, and it's not fluff. To Julie's point, it's not just a trait either. It is a cornerstone of effective leadership. If you allow me to share, this is one of my favorite quotes in poems I've always heard from Chuck Swindoll. Are you familiar with Chuck Swindoll?
I am.
Yeah, so this is a great thing. Let me read this real quick. I just want to remind the listeners about this. Chuck Swindoll wrote this. He says, "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what others think or say or do. It's more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, and a home. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We can't change our past. We cannot change the fact that people act in a certain way, and we can't even change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string that we have, and that's our attitude." Chuck goes on to write, and he says, "I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes." Good stuff. Do you agree?
Oh, my word. I love every bit of that. I love every bit of that. I agree with every bit of it. And as I was listening to that, I was thinking about a story. And when there was a time when I was at Hershey and I was criticized for my overly positive attitude. And just as you were saying that, I want your listeners to hear that sometimes not everybody's going to think it's cool that you're super positive. And I remember being criticized. Oh, she's just so, Pollyanna positive, and she's too bright and shiny and whatever it is. And I would come back to, every time I was criticized for that, I would come back to what you just said a little while ago about table stakes. I would say, hey, why don't we look at the record? Let's look at my performance.
Sure.
And let's look at my team's performance compared to a lot of other teams when the company's not making the number and a lot of teams aren't making the number. And, oh, my team is making the number. What do you think that differentiating factor is? It's about attitude. It's about bringing the best to the people around you. It's about caring about them and building connections and relationships and all those things. So it just comes to, it's very integrated, all the things that we're sharing. But I do want people to know that sometimes people aren't going to accept it as real. And you're going to have to prove to them that it's real when you show them the record of your performance that goes with it.
Yeah, it's how you get there, right? And it makes a big difference.
Exactly.
And it typically leads to greater results on that. Hey, let's take a shift on this, and I want to talk a little bit about your personal journey, which I was able to observe from afar, if you will, as you went through it. But your journey through breast cancer is very inspiring. What mindset shifts or leadership lessons emerged for you during that tough time?
Yeah, that was really hard. So I don't want to portray that I was shiny and positive every day because I was not.
Right.
So you're talking about a mastectomy, 5.5 months of chemo, 30 radiation treatments, a couple of different reconstruction surgeries a year later with some complications. It was a lot. So I'm not trying to portray that it was like, hey, I wasn't. But what I really tried to do first, I had to learn how to really practice what I preach. I mean, I teach people and teams and organizations how to be more positive. So if I can't find a way to be positive in that, then there's a problem, right? Because I have to be able to demonstrate and show people what it really looks like to be positive through something hard. So I had to keep coming back to the things that I teach. But what I really kind of thought about, and I wrote about this too, is that we don't have to be grateful for a thing. So I was not grateful for breast cancer and all the things that came with it, but we can be grateful in a thing. And it's a simple word flip, right? So I'm not grateful for it. I'm grateful in it.
Prepositions matter, don't they?
It really does.
For.
Yeah.
Right.
So inside that experience, I would come back to my gratitude over and over and over again. So what am I grateful for in this situation? I'm grateful for emails and texts and phone calls from people I didn't even know cared about me or even knew who I was in some cases, right? I mean, just the love and the outpouring from a communication perspective, the meals, the cards and letters, the sitting beside me when I'm in the chemo chair, the going to different appointments with me, like the things that happened and the love that happened during that experience was so unbelievable. And I just had to keep coming back to the gratitude. Even the healthcare providers, I mean, the gals who would do the chemo stuff and the radiation gals, I mean, I loved them so much. And you're doing something that is so uncomfortable and so vulnerable, but then you have these people being so compassionate and loving all around you. So I think it's really that gratitude practice is probably the biggest thing. And just even inside the hardest thing, you can find something to be grateful for. And I'll give you just a tiny practice that I used then and I still use now every single day. And because a lot of times people are like, well, my life is so hard and I've got so many things going on and I just don't have anything to be grateful for right now. And here's the truth. You do have something to be grateful for, and it's this. So every morning I say, thank you for the breath in my lungs and the heart beating in my body. And I say it at least 3 times before I get out of bed. And I usually keep saying it when I'm walking my dog and all the things. And guess what? On our worst day, we all have that. And I find when I start there, especially when I go out and walk my dog and I start it again, thank you for the breath in my lungs and the heart beating in my body. Thank you for my puppy. Thank you for the sunshine. Thank you for this new day. Thank you for my beautiful neighborhood. Thank you for, and it just flows. When you start with something as foundational as your breath and your heart beating, it's easy for the rest of it to flow. So I would encourage anyone who is listening to find a way to do some kind of gratitude practice. And there's a million ways to do it, but that's kind of how I start my day.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's very real. And I thought it was interesting, too. I think this past weekend I read an article because, it's Thanksgiving, right? Is the time.
Oh, yeah.
We're just past Thanksgiving and people talking about gratitude. But I found it interesting. A lady wrote that she didn't like the practice of gratitude because there were things in her life that she wasn't grateful for. But what I think you just expressed and pointed out was it's the preposition, right? The words that are in there. You don't have to be thankful for the circumstance, the trial you're going through. But you can be thankful and thinking about that in the midst of the challenge. I think that's key. How did that change you? That whole, I get the gratitude piece, but how did that experience change you?
Boy, in a lot of ways. It's interesting because this year I'm celebrating 5 years from the end of it. So 5 years cancer-free. And I was just thinking about it the other day. Sometimes it, if I'm being honest, it messes with your mind a little bit. Like every time there's a little something, especially for the first couple of years, you're like, is something coming back? Is something happening? But really how it changed me now is I place a much higher priority on my health and about being aware of what's going on in my body and maybe doing some of those preventative things that I really want to do. Took me a couple of years to get that colonoscopy, but I finally did it. But just kind of being more aware of what's going on and not waiting to address it. Because historically, I've been a person who will, oh, I'm fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Just, it can wait. It can wait. It can wait. And now, I'm doing a regular checkup. I'm doing a colonoscopy. I'm doing different things, So I think just that being intentional about taking care of yourself, I don't want that ever to come back. And I know I can't control everything about that, but I can control preventative doctor visits. I can control what I eat. I can control my exercise. I can control some of those things that will hopefully make me more healthy. So I think it's just that kind of body awareness and intentional care, probably.
Yeah, certainly. And your experience, I would imagine, you going into the cancer situation, you may not have, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you may not have been as empathetic with that, right, with somebody that had that. Because I think you move between empathy and then sympathy. I tell people all the time that there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is that you can cognitively understand somebody's situation, you stand in their shoes, but sympathy is when you've actually experienced it, right? So you can connect, say, I've been through the same thing. Like I have a condition called Charcot-Marie tooth disease. And so when I meet somebody that's there, I can say, okay, I get it, right? You understand that. But tell me about what role empathy played for you. Did your empathy and sympathy for others deepen as you went through this experience? I'm going to assume it did, but tell us about that journey.
Well, I would just say that empathy is my number one strength. So if you do Gallup Strengths Finder, that empathy is my number one, and it has been. So I've kind of always had that. I think the difference here, just like you said, with the condition that you have, I didn't get the exact wording, but I think the difference is you can give someone that gift of true empathy who is going through what you've already been through when you're on the other side. And so I don't know that that's a change, but it's a gift that I can give people. And I've had many people reach out to me since my breast cancer experience to say, hey, can you talk to my sister's friend's cousin? Can you talk to my aunt? Can you talk to my mom? Can you talk to my whatever? And the truth is, my answer is always yes. And I want it to be yes because someone talked to me. I remember one of my girlfriends she lives in Virginia, and she had been through a breast cancer experience as well before me. And when my hair started falling out in clumps on my pillow, I called her and she cried with me. She just cried with me because she got it. And I think it's just more, that empathy is more of a gift I can give to others because so many people I talk to and they're like, I love my best friend or I love my husband or I love my sister, but they don't get it. And I'm like, I get it. I get the hair clumps in the shower and on the bed. I get the no eyelashes. I get it. And I will be right there, a listening ear for anyone who needs that person who just really gets it. So I'm empathetic either way, but it's just those two differences, right?
I'm so glad you have it as a gift because I have to be honest with the audience. I am not empathetic. So I am on the opposite end of the spectrum on that.
It's your number 32 or something?
Yeah, so right. And Strength Finders, it's my weakness finder, right, is one of them.
Really? That's so funny.
But here's the truth on this. So I was doing some work around this in empathy, and I'm trying to teach empathy to some people about how to become, and you can teach yourself to be more empathetic. And Julie went out and did this survey, and it's like 100 questions, and it would rate you and tell you your level of empathy. Well, I found out that I'm on the far low end of the scale in terms of being empathetic. Which explains a lot of different things in my life, but that's okay. And then I went to my wife and I said, Carla, will you go take this test for me and let me know what you score on it? Well, she's one of the best persons I've ever met, right? She's fantastic, fully empathetic, all that, energetic, positive. And she scores really high. And I said, okay, this has got to be wrong. She scored high. I scored this low. Guess what? I scored even worse the second time I went through it. Right?
Took it again.
Yeah. And so she goes, well, Preston, maybe something you need to think about. And so what I started learning was about empathy. And it actually is a key leadership skill that's needed. As a matter of fact, there's a famous author, John Mitchum. He's written a number of great books out there. But he said that there were 3 keys for all the presidents that were very successful over time. And empathy was one of those. was one of the 3 keys to the successful presidents. And I'm just going to list real quick 7 ways that you might develop empathy and understanding. I'll walk through these real quick for the audience so that maybe they can get a clue on it and understand what it is. Number 1, I would recommend of the 7, just drop assumptions if you're going to be empathetic. That means avoid jumping to conclusions, and you want to seek clarity when you're talking to somebody. Number 2, ask curious questions, right? Be genuinely interested in somebody. That's one of the principles Dale Carnegie taught that I learned a long time ago on how to win friends and influence people is take a genuine interest in somebody else. And then listening. You can't talk enough about listening, right? On it, you need to focus on hearing and not replying. A lot of times we think about our next question, or we're processing and not actually there and present with somebody listening. Next, number 4 would be expand your circle. And so what I mean by that is engaging with people outside of your usual experience, getting outside your bubble to go do something different. Walk in their shoes is number 5. Imagine their reality to deepen your understanding of that. Number 6, be present. And what I mean by that is give undivided attention in every interaction that you're in. One of the most important things I heard from somebody not too long ago at the church I attend said that, you know what, the way you, I guess, communicate value and dignity to somebody else is that undivided attention, right? And then last but not least, beyond the be present, number 7, talk deeply. And what that means is prioritize meaningful, trust-building conversations. If you can do those things, if you can drop assumptions, ask curious questions, listen fully, expand your circle, walk in their shoes, be present, and talk deeply, you'll become more empathetic. And I found, Julie, that as I learned those principles, boy, I started doing those, and it made a big difference about the way I saw people and interacted with them.
So huge. Oh my gosh. I love all of those things. And it's funny. I remember when I joined one of the last teams I ended up leading at Hershey, and it was mostly men, which no criticism, whatever, just mostly men.
I'll bring it.
And but the way I kind of operated, again, because empathy is my top strength, is I would start every meeting, whether it was a group meeting or mostly one-on-ones, with some connection, right? So tell me how you're doing, or gosh, you look like you're a little bit stressed today, or whatever. Like, I was really good at reading their faces and their body language.
Right.
And I would always start with a little bit of that, and just how are you doing? And just some curiosity and good questions. And at first they were like, but after a few months of doing that, they were like, oh my gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. No one's ever cared about this before. No one's ever whatever before. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love that. And we were building these deep relationships, and it's because of taking the time to be curious. And when someone is struggling, you talked about listening. Empathy really is about sitting beside someone, and it's no judgment, and it's no anything. And it's just, you know what? I know you're going through something hard. I'm just going to sit here right next to you and give you whatever you need. I'll listen. I'll cry with you. I'll watch a movie with you. We can go for a walk together, but just, I'm here and I've got you. That's all.
That's good. So good. So it makes a big difference. I love the fact that you opened a meeting with that. And if you're listening today and you lead meetings, I highly recommend that. There's a group called the Phoenix Group. If you're watching the video, I'm having a hard time with my earplug here, so we'll do all that. Yeah, throw it on the back on it. I see musicians do that. Now I know what they're doing, right?
Totally.
Is on the stage. But the Phoenix Group out of London, we had them facilitating some group discussions at the Coca-Cola Company. It was last year I was there. But the individual who is leading those always came in and asked us the question, how are we coming in today? How are you arriving to the meeting today? And we were able to say, I've had a rough day. I'm really not engaged today. Or somebody's like, yeah, this is great. I've had a great day. Looking forward to it today. So we'd get a picture of where everybody was. And then she said, okay, take a minute and let's think about what we have to focus on. She gave everybody a second to kind of decompress and come in and then settle into what we were doing. And I thought that was powerful to ask that empathetic question about all that.
I like that. And
love the and.
You
please.
have to have an environment of trust to be able to have meetings where you ask that question, because some cultures, how are we doing today? Fine, good, everything's great, blah, blah. Okay, let's start the agenda. So obviously there was a safe space already created and a culture of openness and honesty that you could say how you were really feeling, because that's the key. If you're going to ask questions like that, you have to have the environment where no one is judged. There's no retribution. There's no there's no kind of downstream impact to being truthful. So giving people that safe, truly safe space to be honest when you ask questions like that.
So good. So good. Hey, let's move into the next topic here. I want to chat between the two of us. So I know that you have had a long, successful career at Hershey, and then you moved on, and you are now, I think you're doing the speaking, training, and the writing gig and all of that full time. How is this new chapter aligned with your personal values and goals? I'd love to hear about your journey about moving from the corporate world into doing what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. So, I spent 19 years with the Hershey company, selling chocolate and leading teams all over the U.S. And when I took on what would end up being my last role with Hershey, I was leading a bunch of teams all over the U.S. And as I went out to meet one of my teams in Boise, my Albertsons team out west, one of the guys gave me a copy of John Gordon's book, The Energy Bus. And he said, and I was his new boss. And he said, I really want you to read this book on your flight home. So I knew it was important to him. So I read The Energy Bus on my flight home. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, I love this. This is how I'm going to run my team. This is how everyone should be running their team. And so I started putting the principles from The Energy Bus into practice with my team at Hershey. And what I saw was that my team was not only able to thrive when the business was good and everything was going on just as we wanted it to go, but my team was able to thrive when the business got hard and when the chips were down and when the finger pointing was happening in other areas and when the struggles were happening in other areas. We were able to kind of rise above. I'm not saying we were perfect, but we were able to rise above and keep staying positive and finding a way forward. And so what I found is through that process, there was a deeper seed planted inside me. And I loved the work so much. I had also been doing over the course of my career a lot of speaking and training and things internally at Hershey and with customers and at events and different things. And I just kind of clicked with the messages of John Gordon. So I read The Energy Bus. I wrote him a letter and an email, and I said, thank you for The Energy Bus. This is the impact it's had on my team. And he responded. And so I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I read another book and wrote another letter and read another book and wrote another letter. And then I hired him to come speak at an executive women's event here in Charlotte. This is back in March of 2014. And after that, after I had read 3 books at that time and then met him and saw him speak in person, I was so sold on everything that he was teaching. I was like, this is what I want to do. And so that whole year from March to December of 2014, I kept saying to my husband, the John Gordon thing, the John Gordon thing, the John Gordon thing. And in December, he was like, what exactly is the John Gordon thing? And I said, oh, I'm going to be working with him next year. And he said, does he know that? And I was like, excellent point, honey. So I wrote him one more letter at the end of 2014. And I basically said top 5 reasons why we should work together next year. And a few days later, he called and he said, what do you want to do with this? And at the time, I just wanted to speak about the Energy Bus. I wanted to be on a stage sharing the Energy Bus message with the world. And by the way, for anyone who doesn't know what the Energy Bus is, it's a fable and it's about the 10 rules to fuel your work, life, and team with positive energy. So it's everything that we're talking about, right? So we talked and he said, how much money do you make? What do you want to do with this? He was asking me all these really hard questions. And by the time we hung up, about 30 minutes on the phone, he said, okay, you can go out and speak about the Energy Bus for free before you quit your day job and see if you really like it. And it was great advice, obviously, because you know the world that we came from and the speaking world when you're starting from scratch, it truly is starting from scratch. So I did go out and I spoke for free for about 6 months, and I spoke to junior leagues and women's groups and Rotary clubs and anyone who would listen about the Energy Bus. And I found that I really did love it. So it's about 9.5 years ago now. I've been working with John. And again, it started out speaking about the Energy Bus. And then a client would say, well, I want a talk on this book, and I want a workshop on this book, and I want something on this, and I want something on this. And so I really just created all of it. There was nothing. And I was able to create all of it with John to build up kind of the product side of the business. And then after a few years of doing that, clients really wanted training. So John and I created the Power of Positive Leadership training program together, a full day training and then a certification program on the next day. So I've been certifying trainers since 2019 on all of the work. And then over the last couple of years, my teammate and partner, Amy P. Kelly, and I have built kind of new and refreshed workshop content around the energy bus, the power of positive leadership, and the power of a positive team. And we're certifying trainers all the time on teaching all three of those programs. So there's a lot there. And we've been creating a lot of content and doing the work to really, it's about creating a more positive world. So the mission is to create a more positive world. And so we're empowering people to go out and teach the work so we can help others impact their organizations, their teams, and themselves individually. So it's been quite a journey, and I love it because it also has enabled me to write a couple of books myself that are separate from John's work, but just really being in that environment of authors and of people who have inspired ideas. And after doing that for a few years, it helped me just kind of put some seeds in my own head about what I might want to write about or talk about. So I've written a couple of books now, and it's really cool. And it's not even about becoming a bestseller. It's about hopefully writing something that is meaningful and important, and it's going to land in the right hands and hopefully make a difference for the people who read those books. So it's pretty cool. Lots of things along the journey. And I've got the John Gordon piece, but I've got my own piece and some other things too. So it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's so important to think about voice, right? Because I have a similar journey. Won't take you through all of that on it. But I remember getting certified with the John Maxwell team. And then he's a prolific leadership writer, right? So you go through all the training, and then you get all the content material to coach, teach, and train around his stuff. I did a lot of that at the Coca-Cola company while I was there the last few years.
Yeah.
Actually, people asked me to come in and do it. It wasn't part of my job, but would still do it, and happy to help in terms of building leadership skills. But there's a point where it's their voice, and then you start kind of understanding, speaking their voice. But through that, to your point, the seeds that are planted, then you start to think, okay, about how do I get my voice into all this, and what are my thoughts, and how do I do this? Because if you just repeat and parrot what somebody else is saying, I think there's value in that some. But if it's Julie Nee's or Preston Poore's, life experiences and the principles that we've learned that are, evergreen, they're not just something new and flashy. They'll make a difference in people's lives, and that comes to life through the training that we do, through the books that we write. And I think I love your attitude because it doesn't have to be a bestseller. Which would be nice. We would like bestsellers.
It sure would.
Right? It would be nice. But it's that idea that if it's getting into landing in the right hands of somebody, it helps them become better over time or improve a situation they're in or a different mindset or what. It makes a big, big difference on all of that. So good stuff. Thank you for that. Let's got just a couple of quick questions for you. Let's talk about mentorship and paying it forward. I imagine you've had some really good mentors in your life and in your career. What advice would you give leaders on becoming impactful mentors and creating meaningful relationships with the next generation? Thinking about millennials, because I know you and I are, well, I won't put you in the bucket. I'm a Gen Z, so I'll just say that.
As am I.
Okay. So I'm thinking about the millennials that are out there. What advice would you give them in terms of becoming meaningful, impactful mentors to other people?
Honestly, I think from a mentorship perspective is the first thing to do is take away your judgment and your generalizations, because we all come with our own generational kind of rules and covenants, right? And the way we operated. But if you think about, at least for me, what I've observed is there's a lot of judgment. Oh, all the millennials are this. All the blah, 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 Gen Zers are this. But that's just not the truth. That's not the truth. So take down your walls of judgment and get to know these individuals, because guess what happens in a real mentoring situation? What happens is I give and I receive, because it's not just me giving to the next generation as a mentor or you giving to the next generation as a mentor. It should be always a two-way relationship. So you're giving something and you've got all this great knowledge and experience in your head. So of course you're sharing that, but you're also receiving something that you don't already have, a new perspective, a new technology insight, a new whatever it is. But we can always both learn from each other. So I think kind of the biggest thing is just taking away the labels and the judgment and getting to know the individual for who they are.
Yeah, that's my daughter's 30, and so I'm sorry, Caroline, I revealed that out there. I don't know if that's a good thing to do, but the point is that she always, I think millennials had a bad rap for being lazy. I think that was an initial thought, right? And she would say, Dad, I work harder than anybody. You know, I work really hard. And so a lot of us do. And I'm like, well, you're right. I think that's a stereotype that we need to do away with, that judgment, and move that aside and get to know the individual, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's an exactly great point that you make in terms of that mentoring relationship. And there, Julie, there's another thing I would mention. I think it's so important if you're mentoring somebody, one of the most powerful things that we can do for somebody is to believe in them.
I was just thinking that. I can't believe you just said that. I was like holding it. I was waiting for the moment where I can talk about belief. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. That's
go.
Awesome.
Then you go. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
No, I was just thinking about it as we were continuing this conversation about mentorship. And I was thinking about how many people I have heard from, like from one mouth to another, right? Mm-hmm. From their mouth to my ears. How many people I've heard from that no one has ever said the words, I believe in you, to them. No one has ever said it. And then someone says it, a coach or a teacher or a leader, someone says it, and there's this huge, renewed life energy to go chase your dreams or chase that goal or do that thing. But like just to say the words, I believe in you, it's so powerful. That's funny. We were totally in sync on that.
It's a catalyst, right? If you have somebody that believes in you, whether it's a friend, a family member, a coworker, whatever that is. And we'll throw this up on the screen for those that are watching on YouTube, but I created this thing called the Belief Elevation Pyramid. And I'll just walk you through the quick steps. But I think being a mentor is so important. Number one, just for the person of faith, you have to have a belief in God. Next, you have to believe in yourself, right? Mm-hmm. But then once you have that belief in yourself, you also have to have someone who believes in you. And that person, that mentor that pours into your life, that will speak those words to you, the ones that lift you up and encourage you and set you off on a different trajectory, makes a big difference. But then you also have to transfer that and believe in somebody else. You got to pass it on, right? So it's not just you on that. And then the other thing, there's 5 steps on it. There's a belief in a greater good. And that ties into significance. Instead of just success, you got to believe that what you're doing, you have to have a belief set around that. So we'll throw that pyramid up on the rebroadcast of our podcast here. But so important for, I think the thing that we keyed on today was mentors saying those words, speaking those words, being a catalyst and saying, I believe in you, and having that actual belief in somebody makes a big difference. All right, let's go. We've been teasing this all discussion long, Julie. Let's talk about Hershey chocolate for a little bit.
Okay.
So I worked at Hershey for 6 years, something like that. And I know you've had a much longer career, a very successful career, and enjoyed that. But I would love to hear from your perspective, maybe a leadership lesson or insight that stands out to you that you learned during your time. You said 19 years at the company, right, Hershey? And loved selling chocolate and all that. But from your perspective, what's a leadership lesson that you took away?
Honestly, for me, I think it's about the power of building relationships and connection. So it's not about the business. I mean, like, again, you said this earlier, table stakes are being great at building the business. But I think about the relationships that I made with my teammates when I was an individual contributor. And I got to know teammates of all ages and stages in their lives and careers. Mm-hmm. But then also as I became a leader and a more senior leader, just that connection and caring with others. But lastly, with our customers, I jumped into so many territories or customer team lead kind of roles over the course of my career where the customer hated us. And I had to go in and mend the relationship. Well, how do you mend a broken relationship? You mend it through asking good questions and caring about the answer and repeating those actions of continuing to reach out and engage and connect. And if one way doesn't work, you try another way, right? But it's really that connection and relationship with every stakeholder, up, down, around, inside, outside, all the things. I mean, think about as a sales leader, again, you were with Hershey, you were with Coca-Cola for a long time. think about the relationships that we have to create with all the stakeholders in the organization. It's sales planning, it's marketing, it's finance, it's engineering, it's all the things. And it's really caring about those people and not just grinding and not just transactional. And it's not just what can you do for me lately, but it's also what can I do for you and how can we work together and how can I get to know what works best for you, whether it's your communication style or the way you like to put presentations together or the way you like to email or the way you like to walk down the hall and have a walking conversation, whatever it is. But if we don't take time to build those relationships and connections with people, it's just honestly a lot harder to have success. That's just been my secret sauce for sure.
Yeah. The relationships are important. One thing I learned at Hershey, and I've got a story I'll share real quick, but I remember when category management was kind of the new thing, if you will, coming in. And I found that people that had relationships with their customers and then also had the data-driven facts behind it, if you combine those two, you normally would win with your customer and in the marketplace because you'd have insights that could drive all kinds of things you could do from a strategy and tactic perspective. If you only had data but no relationship, then nobody paid any attention to you because you couldn't get through to them, right? Or you only had a relationship but you had no data, when you'd have a handshake sometimes, but the competitor might come in with some data that would, outsell you. So it's those combinations between the two and how you connect with other people and the relationships. But I want to share this real quick story, and I know you know a lot of the characters, so I'm not going to use any names, but I use this story often when I share in training opportunities and workshops, and I call it the blue shirt. Here's why. I went into sales development. You remember the sales development organization?
I sure do.
So it was some of the young guns that came in to a 2-year general management training program. So they would teach you the candy business from A to Z, right? And so they would bring people in, they'd rotate in and out. And there was this one guy when I first got there, and he was kind of a prima donna and thought a lot of himself. And he stated publicly that he would be president of the company someday and made people feel that way. And so I was warned about him. And the first thing they said to me is, Preston, just stay away from this fella, and you'll do fine. Well, for some reason, he comes over to me early on, and he introduces himself to me, and he takes an unliking to me. He didn't like me, and I guess he's just trying to intimidate me, right? And I was kind of the rookie in the group and all that. So, but I'll never forget this piece, Julie, was that he came in. We were about to go in, and Ken Wolf was the president of Hershey at the time. And we were in the Hershey Theater, and I don't know if you've been in there. Certainly, I imagine you have.
A million
meetings,
times,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So I remember getting in line with these young guns from sales development, and then guess what? This guy makes his line all the way to come sit next to me. And as we're looking up and down the row, he's sitting there, and he's trying to make conversation, and he's kind of being intimidating with me. And then he points something out to me. He goes, Preston, I want you to look up and down this row with all of your peers. You're the only person sitting here that's wearing a blue dress shirt. We all have white on. The next time you come into the office, you might think about things like that and have an extra shirt hanging on your door so you want to look like the rest of the team. Well, I couldn't hear what Mr. Wolf said during the whole time. I was sitting here thinking about, okay, that was a career-limiting move, stupid, the intimidation stuff is going on. Well, make a long story short, I go in and tell my manager at the time, his name was Mike, and Mike kind of grins and laughs. And he said, well, don't worry about him. He's just trying to intimidate you. And I go home and I fuss to my wife and all that kind of stuff. The next day, Julie, I walk back into the office. I walk into the meeting. I'm a little bit late. And I walk in, I open the door, and guess what color shirt everybody had on in the meeting?
Blue.
They had blue on.
And you had a white shirt.
Well, I had a white shirt on, right? Yeah, don't mention that part. But everybody else in that meeting had a blue shirt on. And so I smiled, and they all kind of smiled back at me. And then I asked Mike right after the meeting, I said, well, I appreciate the nod, but tell me more what was behind that. He said, well, Preston, there were 2 messages we were trying to do. Number one was that nobody needs to be intimidated. That's kind of stupid, right, in this environment, and we're a team. But 2, I want to let you know that you belong here, and we're behind you, and we believe in you. And, that always stuck with me, Julie, because Mike made the effort to get the rest of the team on and say, Preston, you're part of us. And so don't let all this other junk bother you. Now, it's funny. The guy that did that to me went on to work for Pepsi, I found out, and I work for Coke. And so, opposite directly opposite. But my point is that I learned that life lesson at Hershey in that corporate environment, like you did, the takeaway with the relationships that made a huge difference for me.
I think that's so fascinating. And it's even more fascinating now, fast forwarding 20 some years later, however long ago that was, because can you imagine now if the expectations in a corporate environment were that you come in and look exactly like all of your teammates and dress exactly like everyone around you? Like, the world has changed so much. It's all about bringing our individuality and our whole selves to work. Like, it's such an opposite cultural time. It's probably even funnier for people to listen to that now. But yes, that story of acceptance is awesome. I love
coming
that.
in with my uniform on, blue shirt or white shirt.
That's right. The shoes were also very important. In the home office.
Hey, as we wrap up, let's move into the lightning round. These are 5 rapid fire questions for folks to get to know more about you, Julie. You haven't seen these yet, so no prep on it, but looking for very short, tight answers, as we call it, the lightning round. You ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. If you could instantly become an expert in any field outside your current profession, what would it be and why?
Don't laugh. But I literally would be a Broadway singer and dancer. And just super quick, I went to see Wicked this weekend with my family. Good. And I cannot stop singing Defying Gravity in my house. And I was dancing around the kitchen last night, and my daughter was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But I miss my calling on that. I don't have the skills, but I wish I did.
Got to get you to New York City and Broadway and do that. Did you sing along? Were you one of those that sang along with every song?
I did not, but it was so hard. I had to almost grab my own mouth because I was like, just anyway, it was ridiculous.
It's funny. That's the news right now. All the headlines is people are getting a little disgruntled because there are the people in there singing along, which is it's all good. All right, let's go on. Let's see. What's a quirky habit or routine that you have that most people don't know about?
I really care about time. So, for example, I team teach. We do team facilitation in a lot of our things with my partner, Amy, whether it's for our You Grow Girl business or with John. And we do these slide sorters with exact minutes for everything. And I am very regimented about being on time. I think it's a show of respect, and I like to be on time.
Yes. Thank you. Yep. I get busted for that all the time. When you're around a person that's not time conscious, and my wife, she doesn't care about it as much, so we get in a little bit of arguments on that. So that's all good. I'm always planning when we're leaving a party, by the way. So giving it time.
Oh, that's hilarious.
All right. If you could have a billboard with any message on it, what would it say and why?
Ooh, gosh. It would be something about the power of love. It would be something about love others, or I love you, or you are loved, or something about love.
Good. Okay, I love it. What's the most unusual job that you've had, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, gosh. I don't know about unusual, but my first job was a paper route, and I delivered a number of different papers as I worked my way up to the Washington Post. And you had to have a lot of grit to deliver the paper every morning at an early hour, even when you're pulling your little red wagon through the snow on Sundays. Back in the day, the Sunday papers used to be 3 inches thick.
Yeah, sure.
And I would be pulling my little red wagon with my hat and my gloves and my coat and just all the things. So I think just you got to have some real grit to keep doing that every morning, day in and day out at a super early hour, whether it's cold or hot or heavy or whatever it is. So yeah.
That's good. And but the funny thing is, I'm frequently reminded by my kids that they ask, "What's a newspaper?" Right? So
exactly.
Remember all that.
Again, I'm aging myself. We're aging ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. I love it. Hey, last question for you: if you could host a talk show, which you'd be very good at, by the way, who would be your first guest, and what would you ask them?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question, because I would love to do that. For the record, I do feel like I have a skill in terms of interviewing people. It would be a tough call, but I'm going to go with either Mel Robbins. Okay. Actually, I have 3 choices: Mel Robbins, Sarah Blakely, or Taylor Swift. Or all 3 of those will be my first 3 guests.
Very nice. And what would you ask them?
Oh boy. I would ask them what helps them keep going when it gets hard.
That's good. It's a good
resilience. Can you hook me up with any of those connections, Preston?
Well, I wish I could tell you. I was going to say, I didn't know whether I should say this or not. My daughter Caroline ran into Sarah Blakely at the in Nordstrom here in Atlanta, and they chit-chatted for a while. So
what?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, you're an Atlanta native, so you should, well, not native,
well,
but
yeah. I know, all good, all good.
Huge Sarah Blakely fan.
Yes, all really big stuff. Julie, you've been a wonderful guest today. I have loved our conversation about your personal journey, the positivity, the message that you have, the way you're espousing it, you're leading well, and just so proud of you and the way that you're leading well and being an example for people. I think it's fantastic. So thanks for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is so good to see you.
Thank you, Julie, for sharing your powerful story and valuable insights. And if this episode inspired you, please subscribe to P Cubed and share it with a friend. To learn more about Julie's work, visit www.julienee.com or see the show notes for additional resources. And follow me, Preston Poore, on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook for updates and inspiration. Thanks for tuning in. Take care and talk soon.